Rearing queens can be an intimidating and confusing task for beginner beekeepers. The multitude of methods available undoubtedly add to the confusion. For this reason, it behooves a beekeeper to understand how and why honeybees raise queens naturally. Once this natural process is understood, it becomes clear all the various methods are simply mimicking what honeybees do naturally. The reason for such a large variety of methods to raise queens is due in large part to the time and resources available to a beekeeper. On one end of the spectrum, commercial beekeepers have time and resources to raise hundreds, if not thousands, of queens annually. On the other end of the spectrum, hobby beekeepers are often limited in time and resources and require only a handful of queens each year. With an understanding of natural queen production, you can easily rear queens from your stock, choosing a method that matches the time you have available to spend with your honeybees. I'm going to share with you one of the methods I have used to rear my own queens. I found this method works well for small to large hobby beekeepers, but first, we should cover naturally occurring queen production. I assume you are able to find and identify frames of eggs, larvae of various ages, and capped brood. You should also be able to find and identify frames of pollen, nectar, and honey. Worker honeybees are valuable to the queen rearing process, specifically young workers less than 3 weeks of age. Young workers have specialized glands that produce royal jelly. An active nectar and pollen flow is important for young workers to produce royal jelly in abundance. Royal jelly is fed to all larvae on their first day as a larva. However, if royal jelly is fed in large quantities over several days to young female larvae, this causes the female larva to develop into a queen honeybee. At or about 4 weeks of age, workers transition from house honeybees to foragers and are less adept at producing royal jelly. We can't tell the exact age of a given worker honeybee, but we can rely on a simple fact. Young house honeybees tend to stay in the hive for the first 3 weeks, leaving only briefly to take cleansing flights. Once they age to about 4 weeks, they take orientation flights before beginning a life of foraging, always returning to the original location from which they took their orientation flights. Drone honeybees are also important to the queen rearing process. Drones must be present and of proper age to take flight to look for mating opportunities. Drones are typically present in abundance during the seasons of late spring and summer. It's important to know the complete metamorphosis timeline for each of the three castes. On days 1 through 3, all castes are an egg. On day 4, the egg transitions to a larva. It's at this point the timeline begins to diverge for each caste. On days 5 through 7, fed an abundance of royal jelly, female larvae develop as queen honeybees. On or about day 8, the female queen larvae transitions to a pupa, and on or about day 16, emerges as an adult virgin queen honeybee. Virgin queen honeybees take mating flights approximately 1 week after emerging as an adult bee. On days 5 through 8, if not fed an abundance of royal jelly, female larvae develop as workers. On or about day 9, the female worker larva transitions to a pupa, and on or about day 21, emerges as an adult worker bee. On days 5 through 9, male larvae grow, and on or about day 10, the male drone larvae transitions to a pupa, and on or about day 24, emerges as an adult drone honeybee. Natural queen honeybee production occurs under three circumstances: swarming, emergency, and supersedure. Swarming conditions include the presence of a strong mother queen, a strong nectar flow, a populous colony with bees of varying ages, and young female eggs and larvae. Overall, the conditions are ideal and result in superior queens. Emergency and supersedure conditions are similar to each other. An emergency situation occurs when a queen is not present. A supersedure condition occurs when a queen is present but is failing. Both conditions are less than ideal and typically result in inferior queens, or None at all if no female larvae are present for young workers to begin rearing new queens. During artificial queen production, beekeepers simply create an emergency situation while providing ideal swarming conditions. By this, I mean we remove a queen from the colony while ensuring young worker honeybees are present, because we know they have specialized glands to produce royal jelly. We provide an artificial nectar source through the use of sugar water in frames of pollen or pollen substitute, because we know this is important for young worker honeybees to produce large quantities of royal jelly. And we provide worker eggs and day-old larvae, because we know the best queens are reared starting on the first day as a female larva. With this basic understanding of natural and artificial queen rearing, I'd like to discuss my method of queen rearing, a modified version of a walk-away split. This method requires us to equally divide frames of food and brood of varying ages between two boxes. It also requires us to restrict the mother queen to a specific box. But don't fret if you struggle to find the queen. If you've noticed, I've been evaluating frames and equally dividing them between two boxes. I've been keeping an eye out for the queen on each frame. If I want to place the frame in the lower box, I simply place the frame and bees in the box. However, if I want to place the frame in the upper box, I shake the bees from the frame into the lower box. Shaking all bees from frames placed in the upper box allows me to assume the queen bee ends up at the lower box with a high degree of certainty, regardless of whether I spot her. Placing the queen excluder between the boxes restricts the queen to the lower box, while allowing young workers to move into the upper box to feed the frames of developing larvae. The next day, my goal is to create an emergency situation. As I remove the top, you'll notice worker bees have moved up through the excluder from the bottom box to populate the top box. The young worker bees have divided themselves amongst the two boxes to tend the frames of developing larvae. We now have young worker bees in both boxes. I then disassemble the colony down to the bottom board, keeping track of which box has the queen. I briefly search for the queen on the bottom board before reassembling the colony, swapping the box's locations. The bottom box is now the queenless box. I provide sugar water to simulate an abundant and active nectar flow. I then place a double screen board atop the bottom box before placing the box with the queen on top. This effectively creates an emergency situation in the bottom box. Foraging workers from the top box will exit for the day to forage before returning to the original location at the bottom. The bottom box will thus be full of worker bees of varying ages. I also provide sugar water to the queenright box. Lacking foragers, no new resources will be brought back to the queenright box until younger workers age from house bees to foraging bees. The conditions in the bottom box are now similar to a swarming situation. Young and older worker bees are present to simulate a populous colony. Sugar water and pollen frames are present to simulate production of royal jelly. Brood frames of all ages are present, including day-old larvae. Given the absence of the queen in the lower box, young workers will begin feeding day-old female larvae an abundance of royal jelly to begin the process of creating new virgin queens. If you don't have a double screen board, you can instead immediately move the queenright box to a new location within your bee yard. I choose to leave the original mother queen atop the queenless box in case the bottom box is unsuccessful in their queen production, or if the queen is lost during her mating flight. If their queen rearing efforts fail for any reason, I can simply remove the double screen board to recombine the two boxes back into a single colony. Now, we wait. As a hobby beekeeper still working a full-time job, I typically reserve this type of work for weekends. Having started the process of placing and restricting queens to the bottom box on Saturday, then continuing the process by creating a queenless situation the next day, Sunday, I can now check the state of the queenless boxes on the subsequent Saturday. It's now 6 days since having set the bottom portion into a queenless situation. Since we know that queen cells are capped on or about 4 days after the process begins, we can expect to find capped queen cells. At this point, there's not much left to do but to wish them luck. Knowing the complete timeline for queen development, we can expect these virgin queens to emerge approximately 7 days from now. Those virgin queens will not take mating flights until about a week after emerging. If successful, they will begin laying several days after having completed their mating flights. Knowing the complete life cycle timeline of a worker bee from egg to adult, we can expect to start seeing capped brood approximately 9 days after a newly mated queen begins laying. For all these reasons, it's best to leave the bees alone for another 4 weeks. At that time, if you find eggs, larvae, and brood, you can assume success. If you do not find any signs of a queen, simply take the frames and the bees to redistribute them amongst other successfully mated colonies. Best of luck and happy beekeeping.